All right. Hello, all. Thanks for joining our first CS for Inclusion workshop for 2020. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Latrinda Sherrill, and I am the CS for PGH lead of Remake Learning. And we welcome you to a series where we are going to explore possibilities, right, of intentional acts of inclusion, ways in which we can create a pipeline of learners that look a little different from Silicon Valley, and those who really seek and want to seek to change their world through this essential literacy. We have some amazing speakers lined up for you, and we just hope that you totally enjoy and gain some insight on some different strategies maybe to employ in your space. These folks are definitely experts in their field, and they just come to us with a wide range of expertise. And so, just so you know, we are all over social media. So if you want, feel free to tweet while we're in our conversation today using the hashtag CS4Inclusion or CS for PGH, whatever you prefer. And you can Remake Learning at any one of these handles, or you can go to our page and say something, whatever you want to do. If you would like to contact me, my email is here, latrinda@remakelearning.org. And so today, I'm excited again because we have Shimira Williams, who is building digital citizens through play and productivity. Shimira is an authentic change agent that builds digital citizens. As I said before, she integrates digital media literacy tools and learning materials to harness the power of technology, extending learning opportunities and retooling business operations in early learning environments. Her vision for technology includes so much, and she sees every window as an opportunity to spark creativity and conversation in young learners. And she wants people to find your folks on the playground, right, to collaborate and play. She really encourages play. One of the interesting things about Shimira is she recently co-founded CC Busy, a startup that uses digital assistants to give the power of voice to family childcare homes. And this startup won $100,000 from the regional tech competition Uprise, which provides financial support to startups and nonprofits looking to apply cutting edge technology to critical community needs. And so when we think about computer science for inclusion, I always think about Shimira, okay? And so I'm just gonna turn it over to her. I'm gonna stop sharing, and Shimira, take it away.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am excited to be here today. As Latrinda mentioned, I have been working at the intersection of technology and young children for about a decade now. And so it is very much exciting for me. I hope that you enjoy today. I hope you have on shoes because you will be going outside to play. So as we get prepared, I'm excited to be here. So Latrinda mentioned that I am pressing pause to play. We are going to talk about personas, places, and the possibilities. Got an intro? We'll talk about pressing pause to play, 5 ways that I've been building digital citizens, and 7 practices for kids to kickstart computational thinking or computer science in the real world. We got some time for a wrap up too. You will need earphones for today or some way to listen if you do not want your whole house to listen. So I'm Shimira Williams. I'm a spark. I like to set off a chain reaction to kickstart technology education in informal places. I'm a playmaker. I love to convene people to play. I am an interactive teaching artist. I love to think of the Internet of Things and how we can talk to children about those things, because that is the next cutting edge of workforce development. And I love to integrate tools into early learning environments to help them automate the paperwork. There's so much paper. So I hope today that we have a little fun, press pause to play, think about how we create wonder in the world and how we can wayfare through the world in order to see how we interact with technology every day. When we think of computer science, everyone usually thinks of coding, but computer science is so much more. And this quote really resonates with me. One, I wanted to be an architect when I was a child, and so I completely understand that. I was truly fascinated with the possibilities of architecture. In 6th grade on career day, when the architect came and he had blueprints, and then he took us to the window to see the actual physical building, it was mind-blowing, because it was like, oh, what you can think you can build with the right tools and the right people. This graphical representation of the ecological systems is from my friend Susie Beltran, who is over at PBS SoCal's upcoming dissertation. And when the illustrator dropped a copy of it on her Twitter feed, I was like, boom, that is the visual representation that I need for talking about computational thinking and computer science in communities and with children. Because kids go everywhere, but they need the adult with them. And it is our job to help them be playmakers, because at the end of the day, everybody loves being a playmaker. So, where do we start? The real question that I've been trying to answer for about the last 10 years is, how do we fill children's environments with materials that create powerful ideas, right? And how do we help educators, especially early childhood educators, have the intuition to recognize and debug those powerful ideas? Because we know that computational thinking and computer science in early childhood is a 3-gen way of addressing the digital divide. So for me, it was like, how do I give kids the whoosh that made them want to play more? Because we also know that play is the most fundamental part of early childhood learning, right? It's the social aspect. It's how do you find friends? How do you figure out your own self-regulation too, right? The best times are when you can play alone, which allow you to wander and be wanderless. And then how do you co-create with your friends, right? Because things are good by themselves, but when you add the power of other people, it's like, psh. And so like, I like to say that I'm a spark, and I would like to set a chain reaction with my friends. And so a few months ago, I was doing a presentation for early childhood around media literacy. And I was talking to one of my friends, and we had this long discussion about how in early childhood, it was just like the most quintessential place, because your job was to help kids be a problem solver, and you knew that you had to model. Early childhood is all about modeling. And what I realized was certain groups of people didn't have the opportunity or time or space to play. And so the question then became, how do we intentionally incorporate, model, and give people access to the tools they need to think about computational thinking, especially in underserved communities?
So research shows us that early math is highly predictive of later academic success. But the thing that I really like about early math talk is that it's not about worksheets, it's not about doing 1 + 1 = 2 over and over and over again. It's really about playing and interacting with your child. So whether it's at the kitchen table counting your pancakes or going out into the world and talking about shapes you see outside, it's really fun and engaging, and yet we know that the early math talk helps kids achieve in math later on.
So Math Talk is a great strategy for teachers to incorporate to develop children's math language. So in the classroom, if they mathematize by incorporating the math of what children do on a daily basis, children are able to learn the vocabulary that happens during block building. So they might be building houses or castles, so they start investigating the concepts of height and width and length and perimeter and area and all these great concepts that come out of that play.
Math is the only universal language that's both silent and auditory, and exploring large numbers allows children to think about abstract things and play and imagine and innovate. So exploration of pi lets children think about the infinite possibilities that are available to them and allows them to be true creators of things that are not here. So from concept to reality, and what things can you do?
Today, I hope to actually help you and me think about how do we fill a child's environment with materials embedded with powerful ideas and make time and space to discover, recognize, and debug powerful ideas. One way I love to say that we do this is create a window of wonder. And you do that by intentionally incorporating. And for early childhood people, we know that's just co-creating. That's lap, right? When we think of literacy, there's never an app to replace a lap. But when you and your child sit in the window and explore what is possible and what you can see, it creates and activates grown-ups to want to take children and trust them to wander and wayfaring, right? Which is modeling. Hey, when's the last time that you went on a walk with your child or even another adult? You notice so many things about your community and how they are embedded and how you engage. So I want people to press pause to play so that we can make a variety of digital and analog computational thinking skills accessible in a child's home, learning environment, and community at large. Press pause to play. Yes, that has been my theme. It has come through the pandemic, right? Because we all have needed to get up and get off of Zoom. And so I wanted to explore the possibilities around play, especially when the pandemic originally hit and everyone was forced to stay home. And it was like people who are not used to being home with 3 to 5-year-olds all day and planning their day. Woo, parents, I feel for you, because when I first got into early childhood, I was like, how do you plan for them to have stuff to do all day? But it became modeling, it became playing. I became a co-creator of their day and in their play. And from observing them and pressing pause and looking at their play, I was able to engage them in a better way, but I was also able to engage their families in a different way. And then I created spaces for them to play with us. So I want to encourage people to press pause to play. 3 articles that I have that I think that everyone should take a moment to read are the aspects of play in early childhood. There are some special things that you should consider. And one of my colleagues, Amanda Armstrong, who is a leader and a current PhD candidate that works at the intersection of technology and young children too, wrote a great article for you at Utopia that you can find on the Padlet. I'll drop the link in the chat because I forgot to do that at the beginning. Recently, Kathy Patchell, who, if you understand and talk about play, you know her work. Recently, they just dropped a new path to education reform. Playful learning promotes 21st century skills and beyond. She also has the book, A Mandate for Playful Learning and Play in Preschool, which is a great book to read. I've read this book several times. It's also on the Padlet, so don't worry about trying to keep up with my resources. The book that actually blew my mind and is the spark for today is Kara Gaunt's The Games Black Girls Play, Learning the Ropes from Double Dutch to Hip Hop. And this summer, Kara wrote for the New York Times about the magic of Black girls play. See, that was the missing part when I was thinking about computer science and computational thinking and how I got underserved communities to understand and embrace it. I hadn't really thought about the magic, but more so the sophistication, the complexity and the nimbleness of Black girls play and how it was passed down kinetically. So it didn't always have formal writing. So it was something that you couldn't capture, you kind of just knew through modeling. Your big sister showed you, your aunt showed you, your mom showed you, but there was never always a formal writing. And she describes that in such great context in this book, as well as how it connected to hip hop. And if you know me, you know that I am a hip hop fan, and it will show in this presentation today. So let's get started. And that's how I got to find your playground and your people to collaborate and create community. Because that's what I was really doing. Finding my people on the playground and working with them to collaborate and create those powerful, playful experiences that embedded the correct materials in children's homes, homes, communities, and schools at large. The first thing that we have to get children to do and in those communities is bet on yourself. Look, building new things and coming up with new things is a risk. You are taking the risk to put your time and investment in and even come up with the idea, because you know that feeling when you have a new idea and you've sparked it and you're like, I don't know if I should run with it. But that feeling when you bet on yourself and you know that it's right. And so for me, betting on myself was pressing pause on my consulting company to leave and start an early stage startup. It was a big leap that I had to take, but it was an amazing experience, even though I am no longer working on it. And so we should talk about, how do we help people create this space and time to bet on themselves? It's okay to disrupt things.
Hey Google, call Maddie.
Okay, dialing now.
Hey Google, order my usual from Starbucks.
All right, getting Starbucks.
Hey Google, call my brother.
Hey Google, call my brother.
Text Carol.
Can you text Carol for me too?
Hey Google, who just texted me?
Yo Google.
Kevin, that was great, but we haven't made Yo Google work yet, so you have to say,
Hey Google.
Hey Google.
Hi, how can I help?
Play some Sia.
Hey Google, play the next episode.
Play The Crown on Netflix.
All Channing Tatum movies.
Yo Google.
That was great. Can we just get one where you say, Hey Google?
Hey Google, find my phone.
Whoa.
Hey Google.
Hey Google.
Hey Google. Yo Google, lock the front door.
Okay, let's just go with Yo Google then. I'm sure the engineers would love to update everything.
Yo.
for you.
So that's one of my favorite commercials because it intentionally shows the impact of computing in various ways. It shows how we all think in the same way, how we all can adopt something in the same way, but it also shows what happens when certain people are in the room. Because Yo Google is in the completely acceptable trigger for that. And so it relates to how do we think about what words should be said, especially as we move through to voice technology that is coming. What is the cadence of that? And I think about that because the cadence of the way women talk, but specifically Black women talk, how does a voice assistant truly understand that? And what does that mean? And what is the impact for that for long term? The next thing I'd like to talk about is computing systems, right? And so I am one that would say, you give children technology like you give them scissors. And so how do we talk about scaffolding technology into children's life? It's not something that you just give them and they are automatically going to understand. You got to model it. You got to show them how to use it. And the reason I use scissors as an example, no one has ever given a child scissors and walked away. You make sure you know they know how to use them. You kind of periodically check in on them and see how they are using it. And that is a great way to think about how do we integrate technology into spaces with children. And how I've done that and how I've thought about that was the Whoosh Interactive Table is a public art project that helps children not only think about technologies, but their communities and what they want for their community. So the table works through a child has to take one of the cards off the top and match it to the words on the table or the illustration. And when those two items are connected, it triggers a story from a person in the community that answers one of two questions. They tell the child what their role is in the community, but then they use that word and give them space and place and a story about how that child can prepare to take flight in the world. Because when you come from certain communities and you never experience other spaces because you lack access, you might not be able to imagine what is possible.
I love to play baby shark. Alexa, play baby shark.
Sure, baby, hold back by Say Anything on Amazon Music.
Alexa, play baby shark.
Here's a sample of Baby Shark on Amazon Music.
Alexa, play Baby Shark.
Baby Shark by Pink Flown, starting now on Amazon Music.
That's what Seymour Papert meant when he was talking about helping children become independent thinkers around big ideas and solving problems. Because that 2-year-old was able to continuously thinking about solving that problem and realize at 2, when it did trigger the device, she was able to still understand that is not the information that I am seeking. And at that point, she went and found a grown-up to assist her. We want to model that. We want that to be every day. And so the question becomes, how are you putting those types of contexts into the things that you do? And so that's the space where you think about home, your learning environments, and then the community at large. How do you help every person that a child interacts with understand that their job is to help them become wondrous and create space for them to think and play and break things and troubleshoot? We no longer give children the space to think about things on their own and try to solve them. It's okay. I know we want to jump in and we're like, yes, I can help. But a few years ago, I went to a conference at the Fred Rogers Center, and they gave us an oven mitt. And I just couldn't understand it. So I go to the registration table and I'm like, hey guys, could you tell me why I got an oven mitt as our swag bag? And the person was like, yes, we gave you an oven mitt because adults always want to help children with their technology. And so the oven mitt was for the adult not to be able to help them. And so there are ways that we need to model. How do we give kids that space? We know it's frustrating. We're watching them try to solve it, and we know that we can help them. But there is joy in that. Did you see the joy in that child's face when it worked? She even was joyful when it worked the first time, but then when she realized it wasn't what she was looking for, it was like, oh. But there is joy in solving a problem. We all feel it. Think about the last time you've solved a problem. And just like solving problems, all humans are curious. It's that little piece of information you get that makes you wonder, well, what else is possible? And I am one person who loves to think of what is possible. I have a whole program that spun out because I wanted to consider 3D print and weave. And so when I seen Karen Gaunt's video that we'll watch in a second, I was fascinated. And all I wanted to know was, can you program a robot to double dutch? Like truly program a robot to double dutch. And I was never really good at double dutching, like the actual jumping part, but I was really, really, really good at turning. So watch this video to talk so that we can talk about the algorithmic beauty and collaboration that happens. So after watching that video, let's take a pause for a minute, because she talked about so many things in that short 3 minutes that make you really question some contexts for computational thinking and algorithms. The fine moment of when she said, the body, the memory needs something to go through. That right there is fundamental in computers too. They need a physical thing to go through at some point. Even digital stuff turns into something physical, which is why I love the Internet of Things, because it takes the essence of a digital space and connects it to a physical being. And so there's always that push and pull in between them. But as you looked at that, do you really think that a robot could double dutch? And if you've experienced double dutch, you might be able to understand that. See, you need the rhythm of the other person in order to get your work turning correct. there's a symbiotic feeling that you feel together when it's time to double dutch. And if you and your partner are not in sync, it doesn't work. You can't turn the ropes in order for the person to jump. So while people usually think the jumper is the most critical person, it is the relationship that the turners have with each other that actually make it move, it goes. But then double dutch is a competition, and the competition is based on speed, tricks, creativity, which is a data-driven madhouse, which made me start thinking, how could you track that? And then because I love IoT and I love wearables, I was like, ooh, well, what if you had some wearable yoga pants, right? Because now I have a space and place to track my step counts. And then I can think about, are we actually moving in the right way? Because I know that they make the jump ropes that have technology in them. This got me started down a whole pathway, which then got me thinking, I think I got it. I got a place in a space that women of color understood. And it was a space and a place that was fun and it let them breathe. But I could actually talk about computational thinking and computer science. So at the beginning of the year, I decided, why not have play dates for adults? Because we all need to play. And that was pre-coronavirus. And so I said, we'll have double dutch dates. All they have to do is come, play. Because all the women I was talking to in my other work, you know, the one thing they said, I never had enough time to play. I wish I had some time to play. So there was a desire to play because they understood that play helped with stress. Play helped with networking and connections. Play was just good. It was the fundamental of learning. It is, Albert Einstein says, play is research. So why weren't women playing more? Why didn't we create spaces and places for us to play? And how could I do that? To start them thinking about computational thinking. And it wasn't, come play double dutch, let me give you a computational thinking lesson. No, it was, come play double dutch. Let's network. Let's just hang out. Then week by week, you sneak those things in because you're already modeling it now. And so now in 3 weeks after you've learned how to do the jump ropes, you can start breaking it down about an algorithm. Hey, ladies, what do you want to design for our tricks and tips to do? Because that in itself would be an algorithm. There are multiple moving parts. You have to keep the repetition of the things. There's a loop in it. So there was ways to talk about it. And even playing just jump rope by yourself offered these things for little kids. How many people have seen Aquila the Bee? My favorite part of the movie and the most impactful part is when Aquila can't remember how to spell a word and she's on stage and she says, can I try again? And the judge says, yes. And she starts to jump rope on stage. Why? What do we teach kids when we teach them how to say their names? My name is Shimira. I can do it by hand clapping, but I could also do it by jump roping. Jump, and it was such a simple thing, right? Everyone knows what a jump rope is. A jump rope was accessible to so many people. I went to Home Depot and paid 23 cents to get a jump rope made. It was accessible. It was nimble. It was the true essence of Black girls' games because they are nimble. They don't take up a lot of space, but they could take up all the space too. So listen, those are all great. But the question still is, I can create all of those things in my own community. I still have to go out and interact with other people. And I have to get them to understand. And so we have to talk about our networks. And how do you get access? See, I was always a wanderer. My mom let me go outside and play. I wasn't going too far. Typically, I usually had a book and was just trying to find some quiet space because I have 8 siblings. So she never really worried about that part. I usually was in earshot, but she let me wander. She let me be independent. And I would just be around the neighborhood, checking out places. At 5, I learned how to catch the bus, and it was the most impactful thing in my life because I no longer needed to wait for people. Okay, I wasn't allowed to catch the bus at 5 by myself, but by the time I was able to catch the bus by myself, I didn't have to wait for people. I could go places. I happened to go to school. I've actually never gone to school in my own neighborhood. I've always had to get on a bus to go to school. And so I was always looking out the window and wondering and like, oh, well, what's that place over there? And my parents would put us in the car and we would go travel. And so I understood that there was more than just my block and just my neighborhood, which made me understand networks. Like, I want to go and try that type of network, or I want to try those people over there. And the internet, that just blew my mind. I was the kid who took over the phone line with the internet. I wasn't calling none of my friends, but I definitely would have our phone blocked for hours on the internet doing research. And so the question still becomes, how do you get in those networks though? How? How do you get connected? There's an art to it. You got to show up in spaces, which means you kind of got to bet on yourself and you kind of got to live a little bit of fearlessness, because there are plenty of times that I show up to place and I am the only person that looks like me. And as an introvert, I still need to make friends or at least want to engage. But that has actually been magnificent for me and my students, because I've gotten the access to places that most people were probably like, how did you get there? I think the first big trip that I got students to do that let them truly be exposed to technology and what it was like to work in the tech industry was Google, Pittsburgh. I only had a little bit of students. I ran a home-based program and I was only licensed for 8 kids. So I was never bringing a lot of children, but I went to a conference that I couldn't afford so that I could make sure that I met the person who worked at Google, because I knew that they would have a booth there. And I emailed her once a week to say, you know, we're just right around the corner. Google Pittsburgh is like in our neighborhood, but my kids don't understand what that means. And, you know, we do a lot of projects around technology, and it would be really great if they could just see what it's like to even go inside of a space like that. Well, I didn't know that being persistent, well, I did know that part, would get me in. My class spent a half a day at Google Pittsburgh, and engineers came and talked to them, and they ended up offering us lunch, and people were like, how'd you do that? And I was like, I was really persistent. But that persistence also led me to make new friends, right? Because they were like, well, let's see. Then I was talking to somebody. Nope. I went to Startup Weekend. I had no clue what Startup Weekend was, but I was fascinated by the idea that people were pitching ideas about products. And I was like, oh, this will be a great lesson plan for me to do with kids. It was amazing. Since then, I've gone on to actually organize a Startup Weekend education locally. But when I went to Startup Weekend, I got to meet all the people who actually were doing work. So it was like, oh, I'll take your card. And people would be like, why are you at a startup thing and you're in an early childhood space? And I'd be like, because I want my kids to know what kind of jobs are going to be available, right? You can't be what you can't see. So no matter what, the most critical part of my job was to make sure that kids knew that they could be anything. And the one thing that I knew that they weren't getting access to was the tech community. And it was crazy because I live in Lincoln-Larmer, the Lincoln-Larmer neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I can walk to Google. Matter of fact, I walked past Google this morning to go get coffee. It's a 17-minute walk for me. It's less than 2 miles. Every day it's in my purview, but kids didn't know about it. And another space that kids didn't know about in Pittsburgh was the ET Center. Like, we have a world-renowned education technology center, and we rode past it every day. And kids were always talking about video games. And I was like, you know, the place that makes video games is like, there's a big studio here. They would be like, no, but yes. And I also knew that the parents didn't want to go to those spaces because they didn't feel comfortable in those spaces. Tech wasn't their thing. So it was like, I'm out of my depths on that. And then it was like, okay, I'd take my kid, but like, what am I going to do when I get there? And so that became a sweet spot for us. We've gone on a lot of field trips, and we've asked other community members to go on field trips. And then I had an idea. We started a Lunch and Learn series. All those people I was meeting at Startup Weekends, I simply sent them an email and asked them, would they come and have lunch with kids in the summertime, once a week? The one thing they had to do was bring something from work that they could show kids. Because I wanted kids to know like what it was like at their work. Or they could invite us in to their jobs, which really never happened because nobody wants that liability. And so I understand that. However, I think COVID may offer organizations a possibility to do virtual tours to get kids access to places to see what is possible at different various places to work. And I think that'll be really cool. But the kids loved it. And then I got the kids to lead the Lunch and Learn. So every student had a responsibility. They had to work together as a team to come up with the questions that they would ask the person. They had to make a thank you card and a swag bag, and somebody was responsible for making sure that lunch got set up and things like that. And so they had to work as a team. It didn't always go so well. Sometimes it went just fine, but it made them work better together. And it made them ask different questions. And so they would ask the people questions, and of course they're kids. So some of the questions started out about being about tech, but they would go into random spaces. And I would always tell the adult, the real goal for me and you is to help kids understand that they had possibilities and options for their careers. I didn't need them to tell me which schools they went to and like what was the big deal about their school. I asked them to bring stuff that made kids think about like how cool that job would be, or what was possible to do. I even asked some people to bring problems to solve for kids. And then somebody invited us somewhere, and I thought, that's pretty cool. How do we get this to happen more? I haven't solved that problem, but here's a quick clip from one time when we spent time over at the ETC Center. Okay.
Hello, we are the Blue Dreamers. We are a student group at the Entertainment Technology Center, a department of Carnegie Mellon University. This semester, we are creating an educational experience for young children to be run on the Android tablet called Codes. We want to address an issue occurring in the classroom, with a growing tension in the cultural divide between students and teachers, where students bring their own dialects from home and teachers are made to enforce the use of what is called mainstream English. Our goal is to alleviate this tension by giving the students a safe environment to practice mainstream English without the fear of judgment or ridicule, as well as allowing them to reflect on their own language usage. We want to emphasize in this experience that there is a place and context for both their own dialect and the mainstream dialect. For this project, we are focusing on the use of African American vernacular English, though the underlying theory that we are working with could translate to any stigmatized dialect.
One of the things that's difficult in the real classroom for giving students feedback about their dialect is that it's incredibly sensitive, and often
we have a few questions I see popping up, but I have one more thing to say, and then I'll take a break for questions. So, data analysis, right? We don't really think about that. It's embedded in our day. It's something that it was something that I wanted to talk about because I personally love numbers. Like, as we can see when I talked about the power of math, I love numbers. But it was also a way that I was wondering, how could we talk about coding, computational thinking, and really have an impact on representation? And then this image of that teacher reflecting her child's hairstyle. So the story behind the picture in the center with the adult and the child is the young lady came to school and the teacher told her she looked beautiful and how she liked her hair. And the young lady was like, the young lady didn't think that the teacher was telling her the truth. And she started to cry and said, like, nobody ever says that to me. And so the teacher the next day came to school with her hair like that. I don't think if you are not a Black woman or a person who has not always been seen can understand the power of that reflection, of that mirror to be seen. A few days later, that Allure cover dropped. And I remembered how much I loved wearing beads as a child. But it was also an aha moment of, you can write code in your beads, right? Because Black women have been writing stories and carrying history in their hair for generations, all the way back to slavery. And then I was like, oh, what computational thinking or what code could I do this with, right? And it was like, oh, Morse code would be perfect because it was a binary code and all it had was 2 dots. And then I found out about bun dot code because it actually has it was the original code to write for the telegraph, right? So we understand the telegraph is a machine, but there was code that went to it too. And then it got upgraded to Ban.Murphy code. And I was like, boom, there it was. What if I could help women of color truly understand the power of computer science and computational thinking in the most everyday element of our life? It also had so many other things, right? It had creativity, it had flexibility, it had abstraction. It created conversation because you're there for 3 to 4 hours and you have no choice but to talk. You know, you talk to the person who's doing your hair, and there's storytelling, and there's legacy and lineage, and you need to create a pattern in your hair so that you can make sure that you can wear that hairstyle for more than one day. Then the whole thing that made it really the powerful part, it told a story, but it required you to debug it, and it always requires you to get someone's help at some point of the process. And so for me, I could relate it to so many things in early childhood. It was the epiphany point. And so right now, that's probably the work that I spend most of my time doing. And we call it binary beads, right? Because how do you write binary code in your hair in order to tell your own story? So those are 5 ways that we have actually just worked out in the community to create experiences for children, and how could they think about computational thinking in their everyday lives, and then how can we get them to connect it to the community at large and the things they do. Let's talk about some of the experience you guys are having and what is possible. I think LaTrinda has some questions for me.
Yes, so I have one first from Tamara and then another one from Lisa. Tamara or Tamara, if you're interested, would you like to ask your own question? We could, have you unmute yourself and ask it. Or I can ask it for you. Okay. So she asked, could you talk more about wayfinding and wondering from one of your first intro slides? She said, as expected, you lit a spark for me when I think about wondering in computer science.
So wayfaring and wandering, we'll talk about it in a little bit more closer to the end, but the wandering, I have been in a 32-week experiment about walking in my community every day. And just the wandering around my community, especially for that it's been consecutive over so many weeks, it lets you take notice to spaces and places, right? And there's that decomposition of place, right? And so you go from mapping out the space, and you don't actually always have to map it out, right? It's the boredom, right? Where we talk about how do you create space to just be bored and just wander around your neighborhood, right? To say like, oh, I never even noticed that. I never noticed that. And so through this project, through this experiment, we have, every day we are supposed to take a walk through our neighborhood and reflect. And I often sit and think about the sensors of my neighborhood, right? Because that's actually what I look at and look for. Are there new cameras? Are there new GPS sensors for the bus? Are there new spaces and places being made? Is there construction going on? And so how do I talk to kids about the interconnectivity of that and how it impacts their world? But it was a new way to think about a nature walk or an all walk, right? What's the computer science in an all walk? Because we always talk about, oh, you know, look at the leaves, look at the, take notice to the, but you actually need them to take notice to that too, right? And to notice what they are doing. And take notice to the things that are being built within their own systems and how it impacts them.
And so the next question we have was from Lisa. Lisa, did you want to ask your question? And you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want. We can always come back to Lisa. Okay. We can come back to Lisa. Let's just keep going if you want. Oh, she didn't have a question. Oh, she just raised her hand for Akila and the bee. Okay, cool.
So those were just 5 ways that we really have gone out in community. This last one is actually happened last week, and it actually is one of my favorite activities too, because this Lolita tour is happening in the UK, and they are using the dolls to raise awareness for engineering careers for women. So it's like their Women in Engineering Week, and everyone brings a doll and shows off where their location is, like where they work at, which I thought, oh, that's really cool. And it was really cool to me because a few years ago, I would follow a baby doll, which is Quay Quay, which is Shimira Williams' daughter's baby doll. And it had its own digital footprint. And I thought, how one millennial parent savvy that was of them to do that, because the baby doll would be everywhere. But they would also take the baby doll on trips. And it was like an aha moment, because it was like, it doesn't make a difference about your socioeconomic status. When a child has a toy or something that they are attached to and love, every parent will stop all things to find it, to get it, to model it, to have it. Everybody knows its name. I mean, just think about it. I have a nephew who had a blanket, and we all knew about the blanket. The blanket's name was Baba. Everybody knew about Baba. And Baba was a thing that it carried around, and it was a part of that child's space and place, right? So it was always connected to them, and there was an attachment to that item that helped them build relationships. So we're back to the most quintessential part of play, which is relationship building. Every early childhood person understands that, right? Like all early childhood is steeped in play. But as an adult, think about the last time you played. How good did it feel? It was freeing. It was stressless. Even if you were playing to win something, it still had less stress. We have to play. And the elegance and sophistication of Black girls play is a great way for us to truly, truly, truly start to practice computational thinking and computer science. So here are 7 ways. Here are the 7 practices that we continuously talk about when we think of that, right? The 7 sparks behavior, the 7 behaviors that we define in computational thinking. And I got those directly from K through 12 computer science, right? This is not something special or, it's what we all have agreed upon. And we have a data-rich and interconnected world. If you didn't think you had a data-rich and interconnected world last year at this time, I guarantee you believe that now. COVID changed the game. Truly, truly changed the game. We are going to have to rapidly, intentionally model what computational thinking and computer science and the possibilities are for underserved communities in a new creative way. The world is data rich. We are interconnected. And when you don't have access, you need to rethink ways to think about that. And so the question does become, where can you model? How can you model? And how can you be intentional? I want to play. I'm a playmaker. And I really do love to build on things, right? So in January, I presented at NEDA with colleagues, and I ended my presentation jump roping and telling people they should go find their people in their playground, collaborate. And then in February, I sat on a panel, and each panelist was required to give people homework. And I said, go play, find your people and your playground and collaborate. You see, the playground is a great space for you to offer kids a space to take risk, a space to build trust. Think about the first time you had to teach a kid how to play. Yes, we have to teach kids or model for them how to play. Think about that. For this section, I'm going to ask you to take a piece of paper because each slide will have a question on it. And I want you to make a sketch note as you reflect on the questions that are on each of these slides. And so the first question is, will you trust me and join in this experiment? Another great space for teaching kids how to trust and play is swimming. But the ultimate Black girl game for building trust within oneself first is hula hoop. Hula hoop, which I've done this summer, is magical. You can't do anything else while you're hula hooping. All you can do is do that. You got to trust yourself. You got to build your body around, right? You got to swing it. You need gross motor skills to hula hoop. You need fine motor skills to hula hoop. If you can't focus, that hula hoop will coming down. And so I would like to give you hula hoop as a Black girl's toy or play item for building trust. Feel free to scan the QR code to access the Padlet, or you can just visit the website there. If one of my friends would be so lovely and drop that link in the chat, that would be amazing. So, and that being said, afterwards, as I was reflecting on the day after my homework assignment to people to go out and play, I thought about Missy Elliott, who is one of my favorite musical artists, because she had recently dropped a music video called Throw It Back. And in the video, they used her hair to double dutch. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, what creative genius on their team decided, hey, we will take all the dancers and have them set up and coordinated to jump rope to double dutch in your hair. Now I'm back to, can you teach a robot to double dutch? So, one, I love that. It is a great way for you to start having a conversation with children about, I wonder how. I wonder how they got all of those people to fly across the stage. I wonder how the stage moves. I wonder how was exactly that video or that collaboration was a wandering. There was a lot going on, so you actually had to focus. You had to pick at least one thing to focus on. And so it's a great way to think about, one, how do we talk about collaborating around computing? Not one person could do all of that stuff. So a great question would be, what do you think the people who actually do that work are called? What is their careers? How many people do you think it would take in order to build a stage like that? What do you think one of the biggest problems was? Our goal is to make them think, to ask the right questions, to give them the right materials, to spark the right ideas. And so for me, I would take something like that event. And why would I choose that event? I would specifically chose that event, or would choose an event like that, because maybe the night before I understood that families would be watching the MTV Awards. The kids were probably talking about it. Parents were probably talking about it. There's a humming about it. Oh, well, it's something that is naturally and already occurring. I can just embed that work into the work. And if I was to do something like that, and I wanted to think about how could I think about technology and think about integrating one of the practices around computer science, I would do something for my 4 to 7-year-olds that would be creating a tanagram puzzle of Missy. Because that's something that they would understand. Making a tanagram puzzle is something that is just as natural in early childhood as anything else. But I would embed an NFC sticker inside of it. And so an NFC sticker is something that is triggered by your cell phone when you tap it against the phone. It's designed to make a little LED. For me, it would help young children, one, do a little bit of collaborating together. Trying to get two children to work together is a task in itself. And so I would start something small like that. The NFC would give them the wow effect, but it would also create a slight constraint for them. So it would start to be an actual thing about how could they do it? How would you tell me the steps? How can we record those steps? And so the little lights, ooh, I wonder how that works too. Because now I've opened a conversation to talk about computing systems. I need my phone, but I also needed the device. The perfect Black girl game to play is hand clapping songs, right? It's a call and response activity, just like music, especially Missy Elliott's music. You heard that a lot throughout that video. It's also a conflict thing. I don't know if you've ever played the hand clapping game, but if you don't get the steps right, there's always conflict because you're messing it up. It's a 4 to 7-year-old. That's age appropriate. I've talked about tanagram puzzles, which reinforce mathematics. I got an NFC sticker. That's digital, but it also opens the opportunity for me to talk about near field communication, which is actually an Internet of Things. And then the hand clapping song allows me to reinforce the collaboration because I wanted them to work together in teams. We don't have to go so big. It's the experience. It's something that actually I can feel, I understand. I like to say we should all create a window of wonder, W-O-N-D-E-R. A window can act as a window, but it can also act as a screen, but it can also act as a canvas, right? And so how could you use the window to create a little wonder? One, work together with children, help them create a playlist. For a 4 to 7-year-old, thinking about creating a playlist is appropriate. Which songs do we want to put on there? How many songs can we put on there? How long should it be, right? What are we trying to recognize and define as our problem? How are we going to collaborate around computing, right? Those, for a 4 to 7-year-old, that's appropriate. Then offer them the ability to co-create a routine on a voice assistant, right? Because now you're still talking about computing, but now you are creating a space for them to actually do some testing and refining. Missy Elliott is known for making up words. Use that to your advantage. Make the voice assistant triggered by a Missy word. Does it work? And that's where the window comes in. Use the window as where you will record. Does it work? It's a binary item, right? We've all written on the windows at our spaces. Okay, maybe not all of us, but I love it because it also gives kids an extra little woo. This picture is from me on a bus ride with a child talking, and she was trying to tell me a story, And so I was making pictures in the window. And I was able to do that because there was moisture all over the windows on the bus, which is appropriate, right? So the window was a full conversational point. Everybody on the bus now is talking about the window. They're adding stuff to the story. There's a mom and a sister behind her too. And so it was a great way to engage a child about something. And it's a great way to get parents talking about what you're talking about, right? Because you left it in the window. And so everyone knows, everyone can see it. It's also a great way to help children display their work. And it's easy cleanup. You don't have to just stop at things like that. For an 8 to 11-year-old, I would totally take that mapping idea and I'd call them, just add a little woo to it. Make the map interactive, one, but you could even do even more with that. Take a Google map, and Missy Elliott is in the Hall of Fame as a producer and a songwriter. She's actually in the Songwriting Hall of Fame, which is not something most people think about her as. But imagine if you could help children create a map of all the tour dates of all the people's music she has wrote or produced through her career. That now is a great way for kids to start to look at data. It's also a great way to start looking at segmentation. It's also a great way to recognize and define computational problems, right? Because maybe it's mapping it out to talk to kids about where could you really go, or where did you need to go from one point to the other. A great IoT for that would be to look at something like a sensor, a pinchiometer, actually. I love them. The fabric ones are great, but even like a soft one, right? It's almost like a radio dial, because that's what they are. And how could you use that to start segmenting layers of who could, like, who was the artist, right? Because now you're talking about some abstraction of, if you looked at all of that stuff together, that would be a lot of layers. That would be a lot of data put together. But then helping kids then start thinking about how do you pull some of those things out would be a great long-term project. It's not just the, oh, we talked about it. It's how do you keep adding layers on? And I wouldn't put everybody on at the same time. What if you did just Missy's tour dates, then you said everybody that Missy has produced for, and then everybody that Missy wrote for? Because now you actually technically have 3 layers of maps. And the Black girl game that would actually epitomize this would be jacks. Because that is the rule of the game. You have to throw your jacks down, and now you only can pick up either 1 at a time or 2 at a time, but you got to do it while the ball bounces. You see, now you're pulling out data on there, you're pulling out data on here. A great also place to look at something like this, if you didn't want to do like a Missy Elliott thing, is Create Lab's Earth Time map. Would give you a good resemblance of what this would look like in the real world. So a window can be a canvas, right? It can be a canvas for all types of things, right? We put displays in windows to communicate computational thinking, and they're now becoming even more interactive, right? COVID now made touchless everything, right? You could scan QR codes for Windows. I was on a whole tirade about that at the beginning of COVID, especially for business owners to be like, hey, you can still get payments if you put QR codes or NFC tags in your windows. And how do you make it an interactive space if people can't come in the store? A window is also a canvas. And so for me, I would do that with children through a window installation. If you've watched the throwback video by Missy Elliott, it starts by talking about being in the Hall of Missy. The Hall of Missy would be a great window installation for kids and help them think about virtual reality and augmented reality. And that's a great way for kids to create computational thinking artifacts, right? So that's a picture of me playing with Alice, which then you can still talk about programming. It is our job to help them think of, push past what is here. Of course, I would say that double Dutch would be the thing that I would relate to it as a Black girl. You can use a screen as a window. You can take a smart cutting tool like a Cricut or a Silhouette to design and fabricate window clings or puppets to represent characters. And then you can use that while you're creating an animation of a dance routine, which kids would have to write down the dance routine, which is pretty much an algorithm, right? As we talk about, yes, right? And so we're talking about algorithms and doing algorithms in a way that kids can relate to themselves or things that they do on a daily basis. And for me, the Black girl game that I would play would be dominoes or spades or bid whist, because it also is a great time to talk about being able to take some risk and understanding what works. And then you also would need to talk about co-creation and collaboration. That's something that is always happening. And the dominoes and spades and bid whist is really about, it's a game, right? They're all games, but they are games you learn how to play in a cultural context of community and what you do when you have downtime and things like that. And so I was on drill team, right? Or when you're on the bus, tour bus, those are the games you play that they create community around things. And so once again, we're back to playing. It is when you build something and create something new, I don't care what it is, you have to build trust in community. And that is one of the most critical things that we are missing right now. How do you build trust with someone? Play is the perfect space for that. Because when you want to play, you want to play. And that goes at any age. You will figure it out. You will figure it out. Going skydiving, like in the first picture, I went by myself because I had to figure it out. I wanted to play. I wanted to try it. I wanted to try it. And I had to be willing to actually trust the process and the other person. I wanted to play. And I was willing to actually do the work in order to play. Because in all play, there is safety too. We take a risk, but we only take a risk that allows us to still be safe. And a playground is that space. Create your own lane. If you've been in COVID land and understand what a Versa is, which is two actual famous artists battling each other over the internet, typically Instagram. People continuously have asked for Missy Elliott to have a Versa, but no one can figure out who she should verse. She's in her own lane. She has created music. She has created sound. She has created a way to do music. As a matter of fact, more recently, Lil Wayne contributed. The reason he put so many different sounds in his music was because Missy Elliott was his favorite artist. And so for me, that makes me think of what is the power and the ripple effect. Once again, I'm back to being a spark. What is the spark that you can help a child create that creates a cascading chain reaction? And we know every once in a blue moon, you create an explosion. That's the risk you take, right? But it is beautiful when you can create a cascading chain reaction about what is done. And that is really talking about the impact of computing. And that is what we want kids and families and community to understand, that just because you live in an underserved community does not mean you do not understand how today's data-rich world is interconnected and how it impacts you, and how that you can make a change so that it uplifts you and inspires you and your community. And I will say, I would love to give a hat tip to my Walking Alone and Together group. We are in a 32-week experiment of creating a gratitude of journal around walking in joy. It was not planned. It was totally inspired by COVID. We had known each other, but not in the way that we know each other now. But what has happened is we have consistently created space and time to build trust amongst each other in order to co-create curriculum, which has spawned other people to create their own curriculum. And so for this, I would say, co-create a timeline of Missy's discography, because she has more than 30 years in the game, which is amazing. Okay, maybe 20, no, more than 20 years in the game. And in the song, Throw It Back, she has one of the greatest lines. She said, I wrote records for tweet before you can tweet, which if you don't get it, I want you to look that up. Because sometimes when you listen to hip hop songs, you find some iterations and research and facts and knowledge that is great for children to have and could spark some wonder and create them to wonder about different things. And I will say the Black girl play game of this is Drill Team. And I would say it was Drill Team because the symbioticness of the entire team that is required for the flags to look beautiful and on point is very much what is the essence of what happens when a child and the grown-up that is with them are able to create relationships through play that help them express and intentionally model computational thinking for children. I'll take questions at this time, if there are any.
Awesome. Thank you, Shimira, folks. We do have a couple minutes if you want to put some things in the chat or just some reflections. I see some thoughts here, specifically, just reflecting on some of the ideas that were shared, about what you were saying about inspiring young people in different activities with Missy Elliott, the Jacks, and all kinds of things. If folks have any questions, just pop them in the chat. And if not, I think you gave us a lot to even wonder about, Shimira, on our own, this idea of things that are right in front of us and just breaking them down, for young people to be engaged in using these very, close to home topics, right, to like cause them to ask questions and then using that as a feeder to teach these things. I mean, I just thought you did. This is very interesting, and you broke a lot down. I was like, I would never think of that.
The easiest one is to think about how many things in your home now give you a notification, whether physical or digital. I want to encourage you to take time to play, because what we also know as educators is you got to play with it before you give it to the kids, especially around tech. You got to play for it. You have to create that time and space to play. And it feels silly sometimes, but you do, and it'll feel good. So I want to encourage you to play, and I want you to encourage parents to take a moment to play with their kids. Just no objective, just play.
And I don't know if you see the question here, would you do any workshops that folks could sign up for to help build their knowledge in all that you've offered?
Yes, currently I have workshops on business automation available on my website. But when the new year comes back, I will be doing a series on computational thinking and play. The website is productivityllc.com, and I actually will drop it in the chat now that I'm not so focused on talking to you guys. You can sign up for a newsletter, and if you don't know, I have a baby doll. Her name's Zoe. We totally do that binary beads thing. So the doll always has a word in her here to code. You can follow Zoe's work on our Alexa skill. And the link for that is at the bottom. You can also just go into the Alexa skill space and type in the beauty of STEM. So I hope that you subscribe to our newsletter or follow our Alexa skill, follow me on Twitter, send me an email, register for a training.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much, Shimira. We are so grateful for your time and your wisdom as always. I feel like whenever we have something that we just want to talk about concretely with computer science, I feel like we always call on you. So thank you for always being available to us and to the Remake Learning Network. Thank you all. We have another opportunity next week on the 17th with the National Math and Science Initiative, specifically about, what CS for All really means, and how that initiative is helping high schools really think through what that means in a practical way. And then in December, we are super excited because we're going to have Dr. Richard Purcell come and speak to us about just a bunch of reflections. Honestly, I think he's going to talk about a bunch of things around computer science and race and technology. So look out for that. We'll also have a tweet chat in the meantime as well. So we'll keep you updated on those things. You're going to get 12 minutes back of your life. This recording will be made available. We will share it out with you and decide if we're going to post it on our CS for PGH site. But we will talk soon. Thank you. Bye, everyone.